let me start with thinking a little bit about procurement strategies. Most companies, when they think about procurement strategy, they focus, of course, on suppliers that provide the quality that they want, right? Eliminate all the other suppliers. And typically, among all these suppliers, they select the one with lower cost. I would like to argue that maybe this was appropriate a few years ago, but not appropriate now, today. When companies are focusing on procurement strategies, they need to look, in addition to component price and quality, they need to look at the drivers like financial impact, supply risk, price risk, forecast accuracy, innovation speed, how fast you change component technology in your product, and this will have an impact on the type of supply chain strategies that you want to use. To illustrate these drivers and their impact on supply risk, let's take an example and focus just on two drivers. So here on the y coordinate, I look at component price. And on the x coordinate, I look at financial impact. Let me define financial impact. Financial impact has nothing to do with component price. Financial impact is the expected loss associated with the disruption in the supply of that component. Does this make sense? So this is the expected loss associated with a disruption in the supply of that specific component. And I claim your procurement strategy depends on the relationship between the two. Let's take 3 examples. Suppose component price is low and financial impact is low. Right? And there are lots of components of this type. Then clearly the procurement strategy is very simple. It's all about inventory. It's all about long-term contract. And lots of companies are doing this very well. Well, another area where they manage procurement very well is when you look at components whose price is high and the financial impact is high. So components that belong to this category. Here, companies will focus on partnership with their suppliers, focus on risk sharing between suppliers and the OEM, focus on tracking performance and sharing experiences. This is done very well, but this typically represents 20% of the suppliers that account for 80% of procurement investment. That's good, and many companies do an extremely good job in that dimension. Where you have problems, where you see companies do not pay attention, is not in that category that I just described, but really here. This is where the problem typically is. These are components whose price is low, but financial impact is high. Think about valves. Think about oil. Think about components that do not cost a lot, but if the supply of this component is disrupted, you need to stop the production line. And my point is that when you are in that category, there are 1 or 3 strategies that you need to use. At least 1 or 3 strategies. Either you build inventory, and sometimes it's not appropriate, and then you may use dual sourcing strategies. Sometimes this is not appropriate. Or you invest in procurement flexibility. But the point that I'm trying to emphasize is that you cannot decide. A company cannot decide. For this category, well, inventory is too risky for us. We are lean and just in time. We don't want to invest in inventory. Dual sourcing strategies, we are not interested in that because we want to build relationship with our supplier. And flexibility, we don't understand it, so we are not going to invest in flexibility. If you are here and you are not investing in inventory, if you have components here and you are not investing in inventory or dual sourcing or flexibility, you will face huge financial problems, as is illustrated in my next case study. So this is a case study of Phillips semiconductor factory in Albuquerque, New Mexico. With a show of hands, how many of you heard about this case? So, the American guest. So a little bit about this case. This factory in New Mexico had many clients, but the 2 biggest OEM clients were Ericsson and Nokia. On Friday, March 17, 2000, lightning strikes the Phillips Semiconductor factory because of the fire, because of the water, because of the smoke. Almost all the inventory of silicon at the factory was destroyed, and this plant, the Phillips chip factory plant in New Mexico, was shut for many months. Now, here is a beautiful example where you have one event, one disruption, that affect two companies, like Ericsson and Nokia, competing in the same space, but using different strategies. What was the strategy that Ericsson focused on? Ericsson focused completely on reducing cost in its supply chain. Reducing costs through integral product architecture. Integral product architecture allows you to reduce product cost. Reducing cost by having single sourcing strategies for each component. They selected the lowest cost supplier that has the qualities that they want. Nokia certainly focused on cost, but also focused on flexibility in two ways. Procurement flexibility, the ability to switch from one supplier to another very quickly, and flexibility through modular product architecture so that they can switch from one product to another, from one component to another, and they use the same component in multiple products. So let's see what happened. With Nokia, Nokia detected unexpected delays in incoming orders from the plant in Mexico 3 days after the fire, contacted Philips. Philips told Nokia that production is expected to stop for 1 week only. Nokia was very nervous, decided to send a number of engineers to visit the plant. Philips refused to let the engineers tour the plant. As a result, Nokia decided to increase order monitoring from weekly to daily and prepare themselves for the worst case. And the worst case happened very quickly. 2 weeks after the fire, Philips called Nokia to tell them that months of order will be disrupted. How did Nokia respond? They immediately changed product configuration and switched to other suppliers in the US and Japan, as they realized that one component only Philips can provide them, and they put a lot of pressure on Philips to provide them with that component from other factories that Philips has. As a result, production was not disrupted to Nokia at all. What happened with Ericsson? Philips informed Ericsson of the fire 3 days after the incident. It took the news 4 weeks to reach upper management. 5 weeks after the fire, Ericsson realized that the situation is critical. They went looking for supply. Nothing was available. Let's look at the impact. $400 billion in potential sales were lost, and because of this and other related problems, this division lost to Ericsson a total of $1.7 billion that year, and Ericsson at the end of the year decided to exit the cell phone market. So when you think about what I just described, you realize something very important. Sensing and responding very quickly is critical, but also flexibility and the ability to switch very quickly from one supplier to another is very important.
There's special supply chain strategies that we could put in place before the disaster that might help resiliency. And that's what I want to talk about in the next few slides. So let's take a couple of examples. Let's look two industries that I think are very relevant, the auto industry and the biotech industry. And let's look at the historical record and see what's done here. The auto industry is a good example. Companies have done a number of different things. In particular, they focused on two strategies, inventory and reduction of redundancy in multiple plants. And you wonder, well, how can inventory be a strategy? We know that lean has been the philosophy of many automobile companies over the years. How could it possibly be that you could use an inventory strategy? Well, it turns out that most automobile companies have 60-day supply of vehicles as dealers. And if you think about that, that can deal with an outage of up to 60 days. Now, mix becomes a problem. If you go to an automobile dealer buying a car, you want to make sure that they have the model that you're fully interested in. But still, the 60-day supply can deal with a lot of uncertainty in sourcing. So possibly that might be a clue to help us out. Multiple plants is also a possibility. Toyota, who is suffering the most from the outage, has half of its production in Japan, even though much more than half of its sales are outside of Japan. And in addition, even when they have production at other plants around the world, many of the parts needed to be sourced. 15% of parts that are used to build cars in the United States for Toyota are sourced from Japan. Toyota had an initial shortage of over 500 parts worldwide. That has been reduced significantly, but still they're not going to be up to full production until the end of the year. Nissan had not only had great strategies on the ground, they had their 2 plants near the tsunami up and running by the end of April. They also have a strategy of redundancy, multiple plants. They have an America strategy of 2 plants in the United States, 2 in Mexico, 1 in Brazil, and power production engines, both in the U.S. and in Mexico. Remarkably, Nissan has 27,000 more vehicles in inventory now than they did a year ago at this time. So their strategy was much more robust than Toyota. GM also suffered initially. They had 118 parts in shortage initially, but they only had 5. Right now they only had 5 parts. There's actually a New York Times article 2 days ago that talked about this and some of the things they did to find alternate sources of supply and to help their supplier plants get up and running quickly. And so it is possible the auto industry using a combination of redundancy and inventory to deal with something like this. But there's a little bit more to the story than just having redundant plants. There's a principle that I'll call balance that is part of what an automaker might do to improve resiliency. And what balance means is that the production and the sales in each of your major locations are relatively well balanced. It turns out that Nissan, Honda, GM, and Ford have a much better balance measure than Toyota, and that's part of the reason why Toyota is